Hello, welcome to this week's edition of Tom's Trains. Today I've got a little bit of a change of tack. Instead of working on the J3 that I've been doing recently, I was inspired by something I saw on RM Web, and it was a beautiful rake of Silver Jubilee coaches, and I have that kit and I've been building it. It was on hold for a little while whilst I was back in the UK, and I got some parts for it that I needed, and I was really inspired, so I thought I would crack on and show you the Silver Jubilee that I've been building. It might not be Tom's Trains for that much longer. I've been thinking about a name change for the channel, but maybe more on that next week. But in the meantime, let's have a look at the workbench. I'll set all the stuff out and we'll see the Silver Jubilee in action. I've laid everything out on the workbench for you to see where we actually are with this one. But first let me just tell you a little bit about the kit. It's a Wizard Models Silver Jubilee set, RDEB, Rupert Brown. And I've got the full 8 car set, so there's 2 triplets and a twin making up the 8 coaches in total. You've joined me at quite a nice stage in the build actually, because we're just about to turn all the components into the final coaches themselves. So all of the groundwork and the preparation has pretty much been done, and we can start making the model. And this is what we're sort of trying to aim for. This one is probably about 80% complete now. I've got the roof roughly cut to length. I just need to shape the ends there and get that just finessed in so it fits nicely. But this is pretty much what we're aiming for, and I'll explain the individual components that go into making up this this model itself. The bogies here are completed, so that's always a bit of a fiddly job, I find. Bogies and wheels, they've all been painted and made up. So this is the 8'6" bogie. And we also have the 10-foot bogie. I've got 2 of those, and then all the rest are 8'6". I've made up all the corridor ends as well. I've decided to use the kit ones because I'm calibrating this to 3-foot radius. I can get the coaches quite close together. So having floating coach ends, it might be something that I'll add in the future, but for the time being I'm just using the fixed coach ends that come with the kit. These are the various components here that make up the ends. Some of these ones are etched on the back, so they need bending into shape to form the bow end. And then these ones here are the straight ends for the coaches as well. These are some of the brackets that I've made up for the fixing of the coach floors. I'll show you that in a moment. But I've got a whole load of stuff here that I've all pre-made already. Everything's cut to length, got more of those in there, and this is just a little jig that I made up to help me get everything nice and accurate and the same. So that's that. We've got the buffers here, so they can be fitted on. They'll go on the sole bars when I eventually get around to adding those in. And the coach handles, the door handles themselves, I think I'm going to add those after painting, just to make things a little bit easier when I mask everything up. I've got all the roof sections. That was the thing that was holding up this build. It's been on the workbench for a little while now. So I've got all those roofs. They can now be cut. I think that'll be the next job that I do. So I'll show you how we go about that. And we need to, which is the annoying part, we need to remove this rail here. So that needs to come off, and I've made a jig for that as well, because it's actually quite a tricky task. These elements here are the floor elements I use. This is 2mm aluminium. It's very lightweight and nice and rigid, and I glue onto the top of that plastic floor which goes up inside the coach, and I can show you that principle here on the master. So there's one of the floor sections that I pre-cut, and it just goes on there over the pivot and into the bottom like that. Fits quite nicely, and that's the chassis for the coach. So let's take that out. In fact, I'll just leave it because it doesn't want to come out. There we go, it's come out. So, okay, and then finally we have the coach etched sides themselves, and these are beautifully etched. Really, really nicely done. Really crisp, very nice. Soldered on the rain strip, soldered on all of the door hinges. That took quite a while because we've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 on this etch. So quite a lot of soldering to do. Also, I have fixed the back plates for the step boards. They'll be soldered on just with some brass strip. And then on the inside here, you can see that I've added some tabs there, and also brass angle there, and that's just to enable me to fit the coach ends together a little bit easier. If you see here, if I just take an end, you can see that by having the tab, it just gives me something to sort of butt the piece up against and strengthen everything up a little bit. And you can see that if I just remove the roof from the master, you can see inside there that I've used the angle bar just to secure the end pieces in, and they're on the bow end as well. You can see how I've done that. Also, you can see the floor system, so angle bar there, angle bar at this end as well, and then, as I showed you earlier, the floor system just slots in, and you can screw it in here, 4 screws just to hold each one in place. So that's what we're aiming for. I think the first job that I'll do is get these roofs sorted out, so we'll cut them to rough length first, and then we'll remove that the strip on the underside, and then we'll actually get onto some fabrication. We'll actually turn all of these etched pieces into bodies like so, and we should start then quickly to form the real meat and bones of this coach rake. So join me in a little while, and we'll be set up, and we'll get on with these roofs. Okay, so it's day 2 now in this particular build log. Overnight, well, not overnight because I was sleeping, but last night and this morning I've been working on the coach roof, so I just got those cut to length with the chop saw, and also this morning I've been filing off the strips on the bottom of the roofs to make them fit the coaches themselves. It's a very boring job, just needs to be doing, so I've still got a couple more to do, but I thought I'd switch over to the workbench again and just show you where we're at the moment, and then also have a quick chat about soldering as well. So all the components here are laid out, ready to go. It's just a case of assembling those. But somebody was talking to me on Facebook the other day about soldering. They were saying they had some problems actually soldering nickel silver. Now in my particular experience, I haven't had any issues with sort of the differences between nickel silver and brass. So I thought it might be helpful just to show my particular soldering setup. Now this is not a tutorial. I'll probably do a tutorial at some point when I get round to it on soldering, because I know it's one of the things that kind of hold people back from kit building, particularly brass and white metal. So this is what I use. This is an Antec 690D soldering station. It's 50 watts of power, and most importantly it's temperature controlled, so I can set any temperature from about 150 all the way up to 450 degrees Celsius at least with this particular iron. The iron itself, I use a 2.3mm chisel tip for the vast majority of my soldering work. It seems to be the most convenient one to use, and I also sometimes use a smaller tip. I think this is 1.5mm or something like that, just for very fine detail work. So that's the soldering iron itself. The wattage is quite important because basically wattage and temperature are not really that related. If you had, for example, a lump of metal and you had a 500 watt soldering iron, you could still have that set to 150 degrees. You could equally have the 25 watt soldering iron set to 150 degrees. However, the 500 watt iron would be much more effective at soldering, because as the lump of metal is wicking the heat away from the tip of the iron, obviously the iron tip temperature is reducing. Now the higher the wattage, the quicker that temperature is able to stay constant, or to recharge if you like, and so that's why a higher wattage iron is sometimes beneficial when you're trying to solder. 50 watts I find is absolutely fine for the vast majority of my work. Sometimes I could probably do with a 70 watt iron. I know that people who build an O gauge, for example, often use 70, 150 watt irons when they've got large pieces to sweat together and such like. So wattage is quite important when you're choosing an iron. I think 50 watts for 00 is a good starting point for a temperature controlled iron. The next thing, of course, that you need is flux, and that's really important to help you get a good flow between the solder and the parent material. The one that I use at the moment is from Hobby Holidays. I picked this up at the LNER show this year. Very helpful bloke who worked there, and they do have a website you can order online, and it says on the jar itself for brass, nickel silver and white metal. So it'll cover all your liable types of soldering with that one, and it is a phosphoric acid based flux. So a good flux, very important to help the solder flow. Whatever you do, don't use one of these paste flux type things, which are kind of intended either for electrical work or soldering pipes and things like that. They have different compounds that just leave a lot of mess as well, to be honest with you, and they're not really formulated for the hobby, so they're kind of gunky like that inside. You know, I wouldn't recommend that. Get a proper flux if you're going to do soldering. Equally as well with the solder, don't use one of these sort of generic reels of solder that you might find off eBay or somewhere like that. Again, it's more for electrical work or plumbing work, and it won't help you out. It will really hinder your if you try both this sort of solder and the real stuff side by side, you'll find that the proper stuff really does do a much better job. Solder's not cheap, so don't be tempted to buy cheap rubbish stuff. Get decent quality solder. The solder that I use, incidentally, is I picked up some stuff from Hobby Holidays, so I've got 145 and 179. I've also got some solder from Eileen's Emporium as well. All of these are good solders to use, and it's handy to have a couple of different temperature melting point solders to enable you to stick things on without them falling off, and then use a lower melting point solder for an area close by. Just helps with your soldering there. The final type of solder that you might have is white metal solder, and this usually comes in bars. So the gentleman said, I think he mentioned he might have had some bars of solder. It could be that that was white metal solder that you're trying to use for soldering your nickel silver. So white metal for white metal. White metal solder for white metal. It comes in sort of ingots or bars like this, and it's different to your normal sort of wire solder that you would use for brass. So that's just a little summary of what I use for my soldering. Now we'll get set up on the workbench, we'll switch the soldering iron on, and we'll start assembling these coaches. Right, the soldering iron is switched on. We're ready to actually do some construction of these coaches. I've already done a few, and I thought we'd do one of the centre portions of the triplet, just because they're a little bit easier, a little bit less fiddly for me to do, just to demonstrate to you how I actually fit these together. And then hopefully we'll end up with a rake of coaches looking like this. When they're actually made, they're quite sturdy, as I mentioned earlier, despite it being quite thin brass. So we're looking quite good so far. Right, I just need to make up the end plate to begin with. And to do that, I've just created a little jig, which just helps me to align the part and get them all the same, so that the chassis are all at the same height within the actual coaches themselves. So I just pop in the end piece into the jig like so. Make sure it's at the bottom, add some flux to it, always adding plenty of flux, and then the end bracket goes on like so. Now I just need to align this properly. That looks about right to me. About like that, and then I use something metal to hold it in so I don't burn my fingers. I've already got some flux on there, let's add a little bit more. And now we're going with the 145 solder. The iron's on at 340 Celsius. And it's just a little tack joint to begin with, just to stick that piece on. Let that dry, have a look. All looks nice and straight to me. And now I can dispense with the jig and do the rest of the soldering. So again, in with the flux. 145 solder just on the end like so, and again I'm just going to use the file there just to hold it. You can use anything that's metal, and just filling in with solder. The joint has flowed really nicely, it's nice and shiny, which is always a good sign. No dry joint, plenty of heat on there. Let that go off, and that's that. I just need to finish off the rest of that soldering, and then we'll actually construct the coach itself. Right, the end piece is now done. I've soldered in a captive bolt there just for the that's going to be part of the articulation system when I come to actually fix the coaches onto the bogies. So we can now actually affix the this bit onto the side bit. So I've done one, and just check that's going on there like that. Yes, it is. So simply, and that's the beauty of having these fixing tabs here, I can actually just gives me a bit of real estate there just to hold everything together. And all I'm going to do, as before, is just a little tack joint onto there, like so. That's enough. Now I'm just going to check, look at the height and everything. It looks pretty good. I'll just compare it to the other one. Yeah, that's not bad at all. I just need to make sure. Yes, that's absolutely fine. So now, I'm just going to do another tack joint at the bottom here. Excuse my hand. In with the flux. Double solder. There we go. Okay, now I'm just going to check for square. It's likely that it's canting in slightly. Actually, that's perfect. Lucky. Okay, let's just continue making the joint. Now we can actually align the pieces together, and what I shall do again is another tack joint, like so. Just make sure that I get the height correct. I think that's probably about right. Looks about right. And I'll just make a very small tack joint. Like so. And see how it looks. That's okay. That's okay. Yep, it's all looking very good. Always checking for square at this point. This is the point in the build where you're liable to make mistakes. So we want to make sure that everything is level. About like that, I would have thought. And again, just a little tack joint there. I'm just holding that in place, like so. Bit of solder. Tack. And there we have it. That is the basic structure of the coach complete. So I just need to go around, fill all the solder joints in. Make sure it's all nice and secure, nice and square, and that's another one done then. Well, there you have it. That's a completed coach. Really just need to clean it up and obviously get the roof and everything else like that on, but you can see it's actually not too hard to build these coaches. Once you've thought about how you're actually going to go about them, you just need to think about that. Once you've figured out your method, should be okay to build, and I'm hoping that they might turn into a reasonable rake of coaches. Well, there we are, building the Silver Jubilee. What a wonderful kit. It's great to be able to build something that's going to hopefully look really fantastic. It's going to be a real talking point for any layout. Not many people have a proper Silver Jubilee on their layout, and I think it's far superior to anything that Hornby offers with those awful Staniers painted silver. They just look dreadful in my opinion. So to have the actual Silver Jubilee running behind an A4 I think is something really special. And that's the beauty of building kits, of course. You can build these prototypes that aren't common and get something really unique, and of course it's your own work, and that's the most important thing. Next time I'll hopefully be progressing with this build, maybe get the chassis in and even start to get it in primer and then start the painting process, which is going to be quite in depth for this one. Thank you very much for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and please remember to subscribe, and also check out Instagram as well, Tom's Trains over there. Thanks very much, see you next week, bye bye.